let's start my talk today. Before that, I want to begin my talk with thanking to the GRID or the group de research inter-université sur Tibet et Himalaya for constantly supporting my PhD program and my studies. And I would also like to thank my supervisors, Professor Lara Breston and Professor Tubden Jimba, for their kind academic guidance as well as a personal support whenever I need. With their supports that I'm able to present my PhD ongoing research materials here with you. I'm glad to share that with you here. So, yeah, my talk here, the title I've chosen for this talk is Abhidharma Psychology in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, right? We will talk a little bit about this later because I've shared the poster, promotional poster with some of my group of Buddhist friends, and they have somehow sort of suggesting that saying Abhidharma psychology is kind of non-existent in the Buddhist realm, and therefore I should change the title. So that's a very effective argument, but still I would like to defend this title or the term or the title, part of the title Abhidharma Psychology. Why it is Abhidharma Psychology? Okay. Oh. Yeah. So the outline of the talk for today is like this, First, we will clarify some Buddhist Abhidharma terminologies, and then the purpose of Abhidharma teachings. And then we go to the body of the talk presentation, that is history. There are three parts, and the first part is the history of Abhidharma tradition, and then Tibetan Abhidharma psychology, and then life and work of Sazang Panchen. Okay, these are the three main categories that I like to touch on today's talk. And then for the Abhidharma, history of Abhidharma, it was divided into two, Indian Abhidharma and then Tibetan Abhidharma. Indian Abhidharma I will briefly present as a ground for developing a Tibetan Abhidharma tradition. Then for the Tibetan Abhidharma psychology, and then first we need to understand the evolution of Abhidharma psychology. And then the taxonomy of mind and mental factors. Actually, this is the key materials why, how and why we can call the study of mind in Buddhism as a psychology. And my research of Abhidharma is constructed upon Sazang Panchen, the 14th-century scholar's work. He has written an extensive commentary on Abhidharmasamuccaya, and so therefore it is important for us to understand who is Sazang Panchen and his work. And then at the end, then we need to understand, I would like to present the talk or the topics of the vast topics of the Abhidharma into my dissertation, how my dissertation presents and studies these two topics. Actually, there are different topics that I'm going to show you later. So this is the brief outline of the talk today. As I mentioned to you earlier, that I have a Buddhist group in Facebook, and I posted this, and some says, as you can see on the screen, Some say Strachitelik, Buddha Dharma starts where psychology ends. And there's no psychology in Buddha Dharma. Please correct the headline, right? And in the comment or in the response or reply, someone says, you mean there's no clinical procedure in Buddhism or no theory? I agree, there is no procedure, but psychology is well expanded in it. In fact, Buddhism can be the basis for modern psychology. So, but then the person is very persistent with no, there's no Abhidharma psychology. It's only Buddha Dharma, and Buddha Dharma is beyond psychology, and therefore still, insist that I change the title, part of the title, Abhidharma Psychology. So this is how, and I want to thank to these commentators or feedbacks, because it gives me chance to rethink about what is Abhidharma Psychology and how this terminology can take negatively, and therefore I need to be more cautious about deploying Abhidharma Psychology in my research. So I want to thank them for giving me chance to reconsider about this terminology. And now, Abhidharma Psychology, is this the term that I invented? Definitely not. I found Abhidharma Psychology, the terminology, the English terminology, maybe not for the first time, but what I found, where I found is in the Professor Thubten Chimba's, the Library of Tibetan Classics. The 22nd volume is called Wampa Kongma Devi Semkam Rekpa. That is translated into English as Abhidharma Psychology and Phenomenology. So therefore, I did not invent this combined words or thematic term, but it is already there. More importantly, if we look or if we trace back into the Abhidharma treatises, Abhidharma studies, and then, of course, Abhidharma Psychology is an English terminology. So we will not look into the original sources, but rather the contemporary studies of those original Abhidharma texts, and then where we get the hints of applications or deploys of the terminology psychology. So in early 19th century, a very famous Pali scholar, right? British scholar, Thomas William Rhys Davids, and then his wife, Caroline Rhys Davids, they were as my research says, they were the first scholars, contemporary or British scholars that who coined or who somehow conceptualized the term Buddhist psychology. It may go back, I'm not saying definitely, but approximately they were the first ones who used Buddhist psychology. And then they theorized Buddhist psychology within the Abhidharma studies of mind and mental factors. Particularly, Caroline Rhys Davids very extensively studies the Abhidharmasangini. Abhidharmasangini is one of the earliest texts of Buddha's teaching, Buddha's words that discuss about the mapping of the human mind. And there, so Rhys Davids also then, based on these texts, then wrote a book called Buddhist Psychology. And in that book, she says the development of psychological definition, this feature is the most valuable contributions made by the Abhidharmikas to the psychology of Buddhism. So these are the, the sources that constructs the Abhidharma psychology, and coined the term and conceptualized and introduced within the Buddhist studies in the contemporary world. So this is Abhidharma psychology is not the one that I invented, but it is there already, and it makes sense to to introduce this. So the second term that I would like to introduce or clarify is the Tripitaka. This is important because first Buddha's teachings were sort of compiled into three categories. Therefore, Tripitaka is a Sanskrit word, and Pali Tipitaka, and Tibetan Tenusum, and English commonly translated as three baskets: the Sutra baskets, Abhidharma baskets, and Vinaya baskets. Three scriptural collections. There are many more things to talk about, but I think to save our time, so I will just keep there. So basically, Tripitaka. And the source of Abhidharma is the Tripitaka. Tripitaka is a loosely textual category of the Buddha's teaching. And then Abhidharma. Abhidharma is Sanskrit, Abhidhamma is Pali term, and then Tsongkhapa. There are many, there's conceptual meanings and then textual categorical meanings in Abhidharma. And Abhidharma is a combined the terminology Abhi plus Dhamma or Dharma. So the scholars translated it as either superior teaching, higher doctrine. But I think when we look into the source of Abhidharma, and then I would also suggest one more term for this is the doctrine of, actually Buddhist doctrine of realization. Because Abhi, you can take the Abhi, connote Abhi as a prefix, or you can take as an independent word. Later they are, collocated word or combined word. So if you take the Abhi as a prefix to the Dhamma, then superior, higher teaching makes sense. But then if we take Abhi as a Abhimukt or Abhichan or something in that way, and then actually it's a realization. It also makes sense. It resonates the teachings of the Abhidharma, because particularly Abhidharma is the transcendental wisdom that actually cuts the roots of samsara. While Vinaya and Sutra, they make the path, they pave the way to reach to that realization, but the actual tool or actual devices that cut the roots of ignorance or defilement is the Abhidharma teaching. Contemplating on or meditating upon Abhidharma teaching, and then one can uproot the cause of samsara. Therefore, doctrine of realization, I think, is an appropriate term that I would like to add on the translation of Abhidharma term. And then fourth one is a Chaitasika. As a Tibetan Semjung or Pali Chaitasika. It's not much different. And Pali Text Society Dictionary gives to either it is a mental connected with thought or intention, or mental states, a form of thought or intention, right? In general, the contemporary scholars translated this as occurred from mind or mental factor or mental event or mental states. So these are the what you call the literal translations of Chaitasika or Chaitasika. These are the key terms that we need to understand to follow this talk. Okay, so then the purpose of Abhidharma teaching. Yeah, it's this is also important, although this is a kind of prerequisite. things to understand the Abhidharma, or even this talk, right? Why Abhidharma is important. And then I would like to directly quote from Bhikkhu Bodhis. There are many teachings that shows the purpose of Abhidharma, but this is very concise and essential. So I took from his work of A Comprehensive Manual of Abhidharma. In the introduction, it says, the Abhidharma's attempt to comprehend the nature of reality, contrary to that of classical science in the West, does not proceed from standpoint of a neutral observer looking outwards towards the external world. The primary concern of the Abhidharma is to understand the nature of experience, and thus the reality on which it focuses is conscious reality. The world as given in experience, comprising both knowledge and the known in the widest sense. So here we need to, untie a few things. First of all, he compares, Abhidharma with the understanding of modern science, what concerning the comprehension of nature of reality. So here, it is not as a third person seeking the approaching from a neutral point of view, but Abhidharma seeks to understand the nature of reality for a bigger sort of bigger purpose. The purpose is within this understand that we can break the chain of cyclic existence. Understanding of the nature of reality does not is like a theoretical framework that you get something, but it's a pragmatic realization that gets you free from suffering. That is what the purpose of Abhidharma teaching is. It's more about a conscious reality. It's not like a physicist seeking the understanding of the nature of reality. It's a more conscious reality that how world is experienced, from the point of knowledge and from the point of knowers, in the widest sense. So subject object in a relationship and how it interacts and how it dilutes the mind and how it clears the mind. From that point of view, we understand the reality, nature of reality. So then why mind is centrality? How or why mind is the centrality of Buddha's teaching? This analysis of mind is not motivated by theoretical curiosity, but by the overriding practical aim of the Buddha's teaching, the attainment of deliverance from suffering. Since the Buddha traces suffering to our tended attitude, a mental orientation rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. The Abhidharma's phenomenological psychology also takes on the character of a psychological ethics, understanding the term ethics not in the narrow sense of a code of morality, but as a complete guide to noble living and mental purification. Yeah, so I would argue that the essence of Abhidharma is boiled down to the teachings of the mind and mental factors. Why? Because according to Buddhist point of view, the suffering comes from the ignorant mind, defiled mind, and that defiled or ignorant mind to make it clean, or to make it to gain the realization, to unveil the obscurations of the mind. So we need Abhidharma teaching. And Abhidharma, large part of the Abhidharma focuses on, therefore, mind and mental factors. So we understand that every movement or every movement of the mind, how it functions and how it triggers our thoughts, such as greed, hatred, and delusion, all they are mental factors. When we understand, we will find a way to remove or eradicate these ignorant thoughts so that we can be free from samsara. That is why mind plays the central role in Buddhist teaching and as well as in the Abhidharma teachings. So let's now, having this in mind, now let's dive into the history of Abhidharma tradition in India. Okay, Abhidharma teaching starts from the historical Buddha around in 600 BC, right? BCE. Oh, okay. So there are, I'm not going to elaborate on this topic. Otherwise, there are some like different opinions whether Buddha, the historical Buddha, has really taught Abhidharma or not. Okay. However, from a Tibetan Buddhist point of view, yes, Abhidharma is the real words of Buddha Shakyamuni. He taught for 40 years during his lifetime in different places. Many of the Abhidharma teachings were taught even in the heaven realms. And those great arahats or his disciples brought them onto the earth and spread. So that is the beginning of Abhidharma teachings. And then slowly, gradually, they were transformed into a written doctrines, right? So that written doctrines start from the Buddhist Council or Dharma Sankiti, right? And right after the Buddha's passing, on that very month and in that year, so somehow due to some conflicts and some reasons, people start to say, "Oh, Buddha passed away, and now we don't have sort of leaders or pure teachings, or teachings start to misinterpret or something that could happen, and therefore then Buddhist council was necessary." But this time Buddhist council or Dharma Sankiti is not as a written confirmation of the Buddha's teaching or categorically, but they were more like a group recitation of the Vinaya teachings, of the Sutra teachings, and then also of the Abhidharma teachings. So the great arahats, they agreed that is a Buddha's teaching, and since then they categorize them into three widely covering thematic Buddha's teachings that are three pitaka, three baskets. The Vinaya, or the ethics of Buddhism, or discipline and guidance of Buddhism, teaches about how to live healthy life, noble life. In that way, it's a moral guidance. And then the sutra talks about the meditation methods, and not only that, there are many, but majorly talks about the meditation methods. And then the Abhidharma talks mainly about the discriminative reality of the phenomena. It ascertains the nature of phenomena, nature of reality, nature of samsara, nature of the nirvana, of nirvana. So those categories are loosely are divided into three categories, and they are called three baskets. And then after some time, around 100 years passing Buddha, and then they start to have more disputes between Buddha's disciples or Buddhist scholars, disagreements or discrepancies seen on Buddha's teaching. Some group says, "Oh, that is Buddha's teaching, that is Buddha." Some says that so different. So therefore, they start to have a different kind of Buddhist councils and start to write down Buddha's teachings. And actually not only Buddha's teachings, but then they start to split Buddhist monastic communities. And first one to ascertain the Abhidharma teachings and having sort of their written Tripitakas is the Theravada Abhidharma. So Theravada Abhidharma, we can recognize them as the first written Abhidharma document, doctrines or documents that had happened around in 300 BCE. And the second written script or doctrines that occurred in the Buddhist school, another school is called Sarva Astivat Abhidharma. And then later, much later, around 500 years later, and they have existence of Yogacara Abhidharma. So these three Abhidharma traditions, as scholars, contemporary scholars, such as like K.L. Damanjodi, and they recognize this kind of, also from Warner's scholars, they recognize these three different traditions of Abhidharma in the Buddhist in our Buddhist realm. So, what are the key doctrines of the developments of Abhidharma doctrines, right? Abhidharma's treatises. So, in the Theravada Buddhism, there's a Pali canon, and Pali canon is made of 7 Abhidharma treatises. And then there are gradually, after having these 7 treatises as a Pali canon, I mean, not the Pali canon is large, this is a part of that Tripitaka. And then it started to have more sort of commentaries onto these 7 Abhidharma treatises. And then one of the treatises more about the Buddhist psychology is the Attasalini, written by Buddha Ghosha around in 5th century Common Era. And then later, at the same time, or a little bit later, they developed a further concise of that 7 Abhidharma treatises, written by Acharya Anuruddha, is called Abhidharmasamuccaya. So this is like a definitive form of Abhidharma psychology in the Theravada tradition. Then we have different category than this, similar. There are similar patterns between these doctrines, but they maintained their sort of different attributes within the doctrines. So Sarva Astivat school also have 7 Abhidharma treatises, but unfortunately the Sanskrit versions were already vanished or disappeared, and then the only preserved manuscript that is available is in the Chinese language. They call it Chinese Agams, Tripitaka. And then the 7 Abhidharma treatises were sort of written or occurred around in the 1st, 2nd BCE, but then later they also write, Sarva Astivat scholars also wrote a massive commentary onto these 7 Abhidharma treatises. They are called Vibhasha, okay, great explanation or great commentary. And then this also is a large, like a 10 volumes. The Chinese one was translated into Tibetan in the 20th century. So we can see there are 10 large volumes in the Vibhasha. That Vibhasha was later comprised or summarized by a great scholar called Vasubandhu. The text is called Abhidharmakosha. So Abhidharmakosha is the most like a condensed form of Sarva Astivat Abhidharma treatises. We will see a little bit later. And then there's Yogacara Abhidharma. text that is kept in a Tibetan Kanjur and Tenjur. Okay, so when we look into the Buddha's teaching in Kanjur, then there are many scattered in all over the Kanjur, but one good example of Yogacara Abhidharma is Sandhi Nirmokchana Sutra. This really constructs the view and concept of Yogacara Abhidharma tradition. Basically, Yogacara school, at the same time, it also constructs the philosophy of Yogacara Abhidharma. So then later, there was a great teacher called Indian master called Asanga, who came in around in the 4th and 5th century Common Era. He wrote massive, Yogacara doctrines and treatises and commentaries, and one symbolic treatises that represents the Yogacara Abhidharma in the best way is a Yogacara Bhumi, as a large volume that is in the Tenjur volume. He summarized all those Buddha's teachings of Abhidharma from Yogacara's point of view into one text, and that is called Abhidharmasamuccaya. So these three are the Indian Abhidharma traditions, extant Indian Abhidharma traditions. We need to know. I mean, there might have many, but many of them already died, and these three are still extant Abhidharma traditions in the Buddhism. Okay, now how it came to Tibet, right? So I thought best way is from making this like how to say diagram, and there are different opinions when exactly Buddhism came to Tibet. So we are not going to touch very much, but it is certain that the King Tsongkhapa Gyaltsen in the 8th century, the Buddhism was well established during his time. And then he invited Shantarakshita and Padmasambhava and also Jinamitra, and these Indian great masters during those times, and he invited to establish Buddhism in Tibet. There was also arguments that, first he tried to bring Buddhism from China, but that didn't work. There are many things, right? Disputes in Samye, but we are not going to touch. But major Tibetan Buddhism was established upon the Indian Buddhist tradition by these masters. And so Samye was the first Buddhist monastic institute built in Tibet with the help of Shantarakshita, Padmasambhava, and King Tsongkhapa, right? And then during those days, and in the Samye monastery institutes, they started to train Tibetan children like Buddhist scripts and writings and readings, and also comprehension of those Buddhist texts. They also become a great Sanskrit learners, and also as well as a Tibetan language, specialized in Tibetan language. So they start to translate Sanskrit Indian texts into Tibetan. And one of those first translators are called Kachok Shansum, and Kawa Palsek, Chogro Lui Gyaltsen, and Yishede. But here, concerning the Abhidharma doctrines translations, then Yishede and Kawa Palsek made the biggest, contributions in translating Abhidharma doctrines under the supervision or guidance of Jinamitra, Pandita Jinamitra, and Yishede. And I'm just taking out his tiny work here, okay? And that is like Abhidharmasamuccaya, and the only commentary written by Jinamitra. So he translated under the guidance of Jinamitra. On the other hand, Kawa Palsek works on the Abhidharma Kosha and its auto commentaries. So these two were translated in the 8th century, and they studied and they taught to the younger generations. And this is how Abhidharma schools or traditions were established in Tibet for the first time. So from the Abhidharmasamuccaya and commentary, then established the tradition of Yogacara Abhidharma tradition in Tibet. And with the Abhidharma Kosha and its commentary, then they established the Abhidharma Sarva Astivat Abhidharma tradition in Tibet. These two schools were brought in Tibet, while Pali Abhidharma traditions were not translated and studied at that time. But these days, the Pali Abhidharmas were also studied and translating into Tibetan, right? But as a tradition, so we have these two. And these two, Yogacara Abhidharma tradition and Sarva Astivat Abhidharma tradition, were started to, how to say, sort of transform into the Tibetan concept of upper Abhidharma tradition and lower Abhidharma traditions. So this is an invention of Tibetan scholars. In an Indian tradition, or even in Chinese tradition, you don't have upper or lower, but the upper actually refers to the Mahayana Abhidharma and lower refers to the Hinayana Abhidharma tradition. So these are the structures of how Abhidharma tradition was brought to Tibet by these masters during the rank of Tsongkhapa. So when we think about the transmissions, okay, the tradition were constructed through the transmissions of Buddhist texts, studying the texts, writing the texts, translating the texts, and even oral transmissions. That constructs, when we talk about the tradition, like any of the Buddhist traditions, it is not constructed within one criterion, but there are many elements that helps to construct lineage or traditions. So the translating text and studying and having source from the Indian traditions is the elements that construct the Abhidharma traditions here. For that reasons, Tsongkhapa mentions in his Lamrim, although this is for writing Buddhist commentaries, he states that three elements are necessary to write a perfect Buddhist commentary. First is the masters in 5 fields of knowledge. Second is carrying the unbroken teaching transmission lineage from the Buddha and application instructions of their meanings. And the third one is the one who envisioned or received a transmission to write a commentary from one's personal deity. So I'm not going to talk much about these three, but the third one, this does not only establish the requirements for writing a good commentary in Buddhism, but also for becoming a teacher. To become a great Buddhist teacher in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, then one has to have the carrying the unbroken teaching transmission lineage from Buddha to their teachers. So that is the necessary, and that constructs the transmission and tradition. And then also the Jamgon, the great Jamgon Kongtrul, in the treasury knowledge, he explains the 10 philosophical traditions that came from India, and also the 8 Vajrayana practice traditions. So this all shows or indicates the importance of transmission, unbroken transmission that has to have to establish one's tradition. So Abhidharma tradition was brought from India unbrokenly from the Buddha to the Jinamitra, and then later transmitted to Tibetan masters and students. So if we talk about the transmissions, and then there are many transmission methods or models, but for what I found most commonly are the first is called Wangyu, the transmission of the initiation or the empowerment. Second is the Lungyun, the transmission of the oral teaching. Third is the Tigyun, the transmission of explanation. And the fourth is the Menga Kigyun, the transmission of experiential instruction. So the best is to have 4, but for the Sutrayana tradition, we don't need the empowerment transmission, but the remaining 3 or the rest 3 are necessary to establish transmissions. I mean, sometimes when the lineage start to disappears, and then Jamgo Kongdulu, his autobiography shows that he took the transmissions and from even illiterate old people, nomad people, and he listened from them verbally, and then he later connects or revives those danger to lose transmissions. Okay, then let's now narrowing down to the Abhidharmasamuccaya. That is closer to the Abhidharma psychology than what I studied. So there are 4, I mean, there can also have many unwritten Abhidharma transmissions for Abhidharmasamuccaya. But with my research and studies, I found 4 Abhidharmasamuccaya transmissions and traditions. I mean, the transmission lineages. First comes from the Chomden Rigpe royalty. Second comes from Tarba Lodzawa, and that goes to Putun Rinjin Trup. And one comes from Pang Lodzawa lineage, that goes to Sazang Mati Panchen. And then another lineage of the Abhidharmasamuccaya comes from Pang Lodzawa to Lochin Changchup Tsemo to Redawa to Kyasabdharma region. So, and these all scholars falls to 13th, 14th century, and until that, there was not much written records that I found to trace. But this is the peak of the Abhidharma, Samuccaya's tradition. I mean, Abhidharmasamuccaya was spread all over Tibet and written many commentaries by all these scholars. And they also written down the record of their transmissions. So with their record of transmission lineage or list, then I can find, or I can conclude, these are the 4 different lineages that were spread later into 4 different schools of Tibetan Buddhism. So now we want to talk about the Abhidharmasamuccaya commentaries written by Tibetan scholars, To having or studying Indian Abhidharma is one thing, but writing commentaries by Tibetans from Tibetan perspective onto Indian commentaries is another thing. That is how one adopts that kind of teachings and doctrines, and can be recognized as an Tibetan Abhidharma. So that is, these are the commentaries that really, tells us that, Tibetan has a really Abhidharma tradition. So Abhidharmasamuccaya is another thing, and there are more commentaries, but I'm not, my focus is here is more onto the Abhidharmasamuccaya and Yogacara Abhidharma tradition, right? So there are around 27 Tibetan commentaries to Abhidharmasamuccaya, and most commonly read or popular are Sazang Mati Panchen's commentary that I study for my dissertation. And then another is Putun Rinjin Trup's extensive commentary. And then Reda Vashinuludu's extensive commentary to Abhidharmasamuccaya. And then the Gyaltsen region's extensive commentary to Abhidharmasamuccaya called Ngompa Kyatsu Nyingbo. And probably the Sagya and Gelugpa were the most prominent scholars to study the philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, and Abhidharmasamuccaya probably was most, the Gyaltsen J's commentary probably will be the most, has been the most, studied by the Gelug traditions. So again, as I written down here, many contemporary scholars, including David Stafford Rule, marked this era as the golden period of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. the era of 14th century. It's marked as a golden Buddhist philosophy, golden period, because most of the prominent scholars fall into, existed in this era. And also, it is yet to have the sectarian, segregations of the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism. It's just prior to that. So therefore, what they studied, what they read, and I comparatively studied the Indian commentary and the Tibetan commentaries, and there's not much different, Their rationales, their arguments in the commentaries are pretty much equal, value, contains the equal value of those of the Indian commentaries. And later, although it seems more and more commentaries comes out, but more also distance or getting far from the original arguments and meaning. So now come to the second part of my talk. I'm sorry. Oh, time has gone very fast. And okay, at least let me tell you about this. Tibetan Abhidharma Psychology. And how is mind defined in Buddhism? Okay, so in general, mind or consciousness refers to inner experience. These include feelings that are pleasant or painful, states of mind that are happy or miserable, emotional experiences such as fear of danger, anger towards those who inflict harm, affectionate attachment to close relatives, and compassion when observing suffering sentient beings. This is this is the definition of mind, or defined widely in the Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist classics. The volume 2 is about mind, and they defined mind in that way. And the second part is more interesting because the characteristics of mind is different from, distinguished from physical things or substance. Mind has these characteristics called clear, aware, and experiential, and knowing objects. And these are the key things that is unobstructed. And that you don't find those, according to Buddhist philosophy, you don't find these in the physical materials or mind and matters. Matter does not find these things. And from that point of view, and mind is more subtle. And mind, therefore, has the power of limitless to store our mental habits. And that also has the power to journey from one life to another. And that is because the mind is unobstructed phenomena and clear by nature and other. So there are more things about this. And then, as I told you, this, Abhidharma Sangha, Abhidharmasamuccaya, Abhidharmakosha, systematically talks about the mind and mental factors. From the Buddha, when we look into Buddha's teaching, you will not find mind as a genre, but scattered in all his teachings. But later scholars narrow them down and systematically look into Buddha's teachings and combine them and segregate them by genre or topic by topic. And then mind and mental factor becomes a literary genre to study how Buddha taught mind and mental factors. So among these three doctrinal or treatises, Tibetan Buddhism prioritizes Yogacara Abhidharma, sources to study mental factors, that organizes 51 mental factors with 6 groups. Okay, 5 omnipresent mental factors, 5 mental factors with the determinate objects, and then 11 virtue mental factors, 6 root mental afflictions, 20 secondary mental afflictions, and 4 variable mental factors. These are the categories. And from the ethical point of view, they also divide into 3. They are neutral group of minds, thoughts, mental factors, and then there's the virtuous minds, and there's also non-virtuous minds. So these are important in terms of practice the path of enlightenment. And one has to understand the mind, how it is divided, or how it is being ignorant, and how one can be free from that ignorance and become a sort of, enriched or enlightened mind. It will be too complicated to go through all these things, but just assembly, and most important among those 51, I would argue, is the first omnipresent mental factors. This is not only academically or religiously studying materials, but for daily lives. We need to observe or understand these mental factors, mental events, feelings, discernments, intentions, attentions, and contact. These are mental factors. If we don't understand our feelings, and we always, are troubled with how to gain more happiness, and how to being away from sufferings and stress. So these are simply presented here. You can read more in one of those texts. And this is the another major reason why Abhidharma Psychology, Tibetan Abhidharma Psychology, deserves to have that title. No one has in the other Buddhist tradition. Tibetan scholars from 17th centuries, they started to write commentaries, independent commentaries on mental factors. And they took it more serious than any other Buddhist traditions. I would argue that. So like, Yongzin Yishi Gyaltsen, he wrote Precious Garland, and he also wrote a commentary on mental factors, Necklace of Clear Mind. Actually, he states, he wrote these to assist, to understand the Lamrim Chemu. And then there another scholar, Walmang Kunjo Gyaltsen, and then another scholar like a Jamgun Kungdru, another scholar like a Mipam Mipam or Jamyan Namje Gyatso. They all wrote independent commentary as a part of their compilation of the commentaries, Buddhist doctrines, philosophies. So this actually shows how Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist scholars took more and more serious about the mental factors and Buddhist psychologies, and they constructed the idea and how it's, to serve, to better understand or better practice the path to enlightenment. And then briefly, am I doing okay with the time?
You have the time. Go ahead.
Okay. I won't take much time, okay? So it may be too complicated, but...
No. Take as much time as you need. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. And so then look into the life and the work of Sazang Mati Panchen. This is the third category. And Sazang Mati Panchen is a unique Tibetan Buddhist monastic scholar. Yep, so his full name is Sazang Mati Panchen Lodro Gyaltsen. And he was born in 1294 and died in 1376. I think he lived around 83 years, on this earth. He was born in Ngari, but there are different short biographies, says also at Tsang, but most agrees that he was born in Ngari, and later he came to Central Tibet and he studied there. At the age of 9, he was sent to a local monastery. And then he started his Buddhist education. And then when he was 15, then he was he went to the Nyatang Monastery, one of the major Buddhist monastic institutes in central Tibet. And then he he took novice vows from Kenshin Kunjo Singye, Tashi Singye, and he gave him the name Lodro Gyaltsen. So this is the Lodro Gyaltsen, and actually Sazang Mati Panchen is like his pseudonym or nickname that becomes more popular than his own name. And Lodro was translated into Sanskrit, and that is actually Mati. And Panchen is a short form of Pandita Chimpo, or great Pandita. And then Sazang is the name of his main seat. So that becomes Sazang Mati Panchen, right? But that started from the Lodro Gyaltsen. According to his short biography written by Jonang Master, he's like a child prodigy, and he has a special gift of learning things very quickly. Okay, at the age of 25, actually, he already sort of had been recognized as a scholar. But he travels to most of the prominent monastic institutes in Central Tibet, including Sakya, Ralung, and these are the major monastic institutes, also Sangpu. And he studied both Sutra and Tantra philosophies with many masters. In the latter, at the age of 25, then he took full Buddhist ordination from Rinchen Trangpa at Shalu Monastery. Shalu is also another major monastery, a monastic institute where Buddhists, the Tibetan Buddhist scholars came from. However, the one day he heard the name of Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, and he felt a special devotion towards Dolpopa, and he decided to meet him. And then he went to Jonang to study with Dolpo, and he studied there for many years with Dolpo, and it becomes one of his heart disciples or close disciples, men disciples. And later, he also studied with the Pang Lodzawas. And Pang Lodzawa was a great Lodzawa. And his Sazang Mati Panchen studied Sanskrit and many philologies, Sanskrit and Indian philologies with Pang Lodzawa, and translated and retranslated like such important texts like the Kala Chakra Tantra and so on. So then, by that time, then his fame reached all over Tibet, and he started to receive many students from all over the Tibet. And so that is how Sazang Mati Panchen becomes a famous scholar. And one time there was a master called Lama Dawa Gyaltsen. He listened to his teaching, and he was so devoted to Sazang Mati Panchen, he decided to offer his monasteries and his monastic communities to Sazang Mati Panchen. And that is the reason. His monastery was in Sazang and Sazang Kandeling, and that monastery later became the main seat of Sazang Mati Panchen, and therefore he received the title, part of the title Sazang, to his name. He wrote many commentaries to sutras, tantras, grammars. They are published by Jonang Pesok as a publication, and they are at volumes. They could have more, but they are still searching, So concerning his lineage or tradition, he was recognized as a Katamba master, and then he also recognized as a Jonang lineage holder. Also, he was recognized as a Sakya scholars by Sakya tradition, Sakya scholars. So he is a polymath. He is a multifaceted Tibetan scholars that himself does not have an individual lineage, but his lineage, his teaching transmissions were spread and intersected into all these different lineages. There were many students that he famous students. One of them is Tsongkhapa. It is said that Tsongkhapa also received teachings from him, and such as Abhidharmasamuccaya. Yeah, so Abhidharmasamuccaya was one of the key, the commentary, extensive commentary to Abhidharmasamuccaya is one of the major contributions of Sazang Mati Panchen that has been studying still these days. We study Sazang Panchen's Abhidharmasamuccaya commentary, and it's a very skeptical. It's thoroughly studied, and not only studying as a positive approach, but he also gives many rationales and arguments and counter arguments, and open Abhidharmasamuccaya. So then, what is Abhidharmasamuccaya? And Abhidharmasamuccaya was written by Asanga as a collection. We already see that collection of all Abhidharma teachings by the Buddha. He finally, summarize all the important points into Abhidharmasamuccaya. And there are different, translations. And a Tibetan translation is kept in a Dege xylographic. There are 76 pages and divided into 2 parts and 5 chapters. And then one of the difficulties of Abhidharmasamuccaya is that the chapters are not well designed as it's a counterpart Abhidharma kosha. It's also like it's more written in a prose way, so it's difficult to follow. So that is the challenging for scholars. We also find a partial Sanskrit manuscript of the Abhidharmasamuccaya by Walpola Raula, translated into French, and then later translated into English by Sarah Bonpek, right? And there's also a Chinese version translated into English by P.P. Tan in 2022. These are the Abhidharmasamuccaya Samuccayas found in different languages and translated into English. So one of the debates, contemporary debate, is Abhidharmasamuccaya is a whether Mahayana doctrine or Hinayana doctrines. Tibetan Abhidharma did not include the title of Mahayana into Abhidharmasamuccaya, but it just says Abhidharmasamuccaya, right? But Chinese version says Mahayana Abhidharmasamuccaya. So that actually shows from the title this belongs, from the Chinese version point of view, this is a Mahayana tradition, doctrine. So then there are different ways to chapter outlining, but the basic points that discussed in the Abhidharmasamuccaya are 5. They are called the 5 compendiums. Compendium of characteristics, compendium of the truth, compendium determining the teaching, determining the acquisition, and determining the dialectics. So mental factors, most of the psychological devices are taught in the compendium of characteristics. And Sazang Panchen thoroughly studies and writes his commentary within 16 major points of the Abhidharmasamuccaya. Okay, so how these massive, informations, doctrines of Abhidharma bring into my, dissertation. So my dissertation is a working dissertation. It's under development or it's a developing state. The working title is Abhidharma Psychology in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, examining the dominance of Asanga's Abhidharma in shaping the mental life in Tibetan Buddhism. The chapter layouts are Tibetan classification of Abhidharma, Indian Abhidharma as upper and lower Abhidharma tradition. Chapter 2, examining the textual source of mental factors. Chapter 3, comparative analysis of Abhidharma mental taxonomy. Chapter 4, concurrent relationship between the mind and mental factors. And the chapter 5 studies the life of Sazang Panchen and his Abhidharmasamuccaya commentary. And lastly, the importance of mental factors in the context of Buddhist practice. So within these 6 chapters, then I research my dissertation. I display my dissertation. And the final slide is the key questions and arguments of my dissertations. First, let's see my research questions, how upper and lower Abhidharma traditions were evolved in Tibet. Then why are there not many historical accounts of Abhidharma in Tibet? Compared to the other doctrines, such as Madhyamika schools, Abhidharma history is a very minimal in a Tibetan religious history. That is one of the reasons why I attracted my attention towards studying Abhidharma, Tibetan Abhidharma. And then what makes Tibetans to prefer Abhidharmasamuccaya over Abhidharmakosha when it comes to the mental events? Yes, Abhidharmakosha is the main doctrine as a 5 major fields of studies in Tibetan philosophical studies. But when it comes to the mental events, psychology, and they chose Abhidharmasamuccaya to source, and I like to know the reason why. So my arguments in the dissertation are: Tibetan Abhidharma tradition deserves equal attention in the Abhidharma religious history. Tibetan Abhidharma is underrated in the Western Buddhist discussion, or Western Abhidharma discussion. Tibetan Abhidharma psychological text will be a helpful resource for the modern psychologists and contemplative research and alike. There are many contemporary research related to mind, like neurologists or and so on. But somehow, Tibetan Abhidharma psychology was not well, resorted to concentrate to. And therefore, I think I would like to present this Abhidharma psychology to the modern, contemplative researchers. So it will be a good comparative studies between the Western psychologists and the Buddhist psychologists. I think that's all I have. I have to say about my dissertation and my talk. These are the bibliography of my talk. And I think that's all. So I hope my talk was not too boring. I want to thank everyone for your patience whoever joined this talk. And I think we have a question and answer session, right?
Yes, we have a Q&A session. Yes, that's true. Thank you very much for your very detailed talk. And it was not boring. No.
Okay,
I have my questions. I don't know if anyone else would like to ask questions. Just a second. I will. Yes, now I see all participants. So would anyone like to be the first one to initiate the discussion, or should I proceed?
Well, I have a question if no one else is going to come in first.
Yes.
I wonder if you have compared the Sazang Mati Panchen's commentary with the major Indian commentary that was translated into Tibetan. That's the one that is attributed to Stiramati or Jinaputra. And if you have compared it, I wonder how much of that commentary, the Indian commentary, is incorporated into Sazang Mati Panchen's commentary.
Thank you very much for your question. That is a very good one, and it's very relevant to my research. So first of all, at the beginning of the Sazang Mati Panchen's commentary, he says that my commentary is based on a Jinaputra's Indian commentary. So that already says that how much materials that he took from Jinaputra's commentary, right? Okay, that is one thing. So when we talk about the only Abhidharmasamukkaya's commentary, Indian commentary, available in Tibetan version is the Jinaputra's commentary, and there were 2 versions of that. And one was translated by Ishide and Jinamitrade. And then in the end of 13th century, actually, it was retranslated because Tarpa Lodro Nyima Gyaltsen argues that Indian translation was not well, it is mixed with the root text of Abhidharmasamuccaya and the commentaries, and not well organized. Therefore, he reorganized and refreshes the translation, but there's not much difference, but still the language-wise, there are differences. Yeah, so this is about the Jina Putra's Abhidharmasamukkaya's commentary. And then concerning your question, and I haven't gone through all the pages of both commentaries, but I have compared some keywords to keywords. And then what I found is that this is a common problem in the Tibetan commentaries, okay? When they cite, they don't say that is from Jinaputras. That is the problem. So that kind of lines I found in Sazang Panchen's commentary, but the language-wise, definitely, he only not compare with the Jinaputras text, but he also compares with the entire Yogacara text. For example, Madhenta Vivanga Karika, Yogacara Bhumi, and also prior to Sazang Panchen, there were some Abhidharmasamuccaya commentaries written by Tibetan masters. And he also somehow give critics, or he criticized them. For example, Chulthim Rigral has written a commentary to Abhidharmasamuccaya. He says, mind and mental factors are concurrent with the four conditions. He stands by that. But Sazang Panchen says, this is not the correct. Mind and mental factors are concurrent within 5 conditions. And he adds that aspects, they are concurrent, perceiving their objects, even from the aspect of the object. He resources, he quotes Sitrimati's commentary to the 5 skanda prakarana. For that reason, yeah. So not word by word, there are his commentary is constructed on Jinaputras, but he also quotes some lines that are not unacknowledged as a citation, and then he also includes more. His studies as a wider perspective than the Jinaputra, I would say. Did I answer to your question?
Yes, very much so. And thank you for that good, comprehensive answer. It was very helpful. I just wanted to ask one other thing. If you, after you finish your thesis, maybe do you think you might eventually make an English translation of the whole of Sazang Pancen's commentary on the Abhidharmasamuccaya?
Thank you very much for your suggestion. I will keep that in mind. What I intend to do, or what I plan to do, is that part of Sazang Pancen's commentary, among the 5 skandhas, the Sanskara skandha commentary, I'm planning to translate that and keep in the index of my dissertation. So it will help non-Tibetan readers to understand the mind and mental factors of the Tibetan point of view. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? If not, okay. Oh, Andy.
Andy, please go ahead.
No, Matilda, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'll go first. Okay, well, first I want to say thank you so much, Mriti. That was a wonderful talk. And I think that it's just really impressive how far along you are. And I want to congratulate you on your really thorough work. So I think my question has to do with the beginning, when you're talking about the people on Facebook giving you this feedback that, psychology is, or that, is not part of the Buddhist tradition. And I think that and I see here that you are planning on doing a kind of comparative analysis, or at least talking a little bit about how Tibetan Abhidharma would be important for psychologists. And so I guess I'm wondering, because to me, that kind of pushback it's really it's a political question. It's sort of like, this is this hegemonic, psychology is this hegemonic kind of narrative that can subsume Buddhism underneath it, and that is a kind of difficult conflict. And so I was wondering if you were planning to kind of talk about that a little bit in your comparative analysis.
I'm not much intended to implement modern psychologies or theories into my dissertation, but somehow I need to touch a little bit. I need to touch a little bit. I think, somewhere I need to touch a little bit, and I'm not yet conformed to how to implement. Maybe in the introduction. Yeah, I just want to build the stage. That's all. I'm not intended to include much of modern psychology. Yeah. But I would see, from that Facebook arguments, I would see that there's a one one group as a conservative Buddhism who thinks that Buddhism is everything and that there's no comparison to the modern knowledge. And then there's a liberal, maybe like me, who thinks, you can see both sides and take the, good things, and then you compare and studies and use your brain. And so maybe, this kind of, I feel like, that arguments or the suggestions are rooted in this kind of concept. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, could you please ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much for the detailed talk. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about your 6th chapter that goes into the Buddhist practice. I think I agree that the Tibetan Abhidharma in the slide you have up is underrated in the Western Buddhist discussion. Kind of a lot of the older books that I've read have seemed to be just lists of the Abhidharma definitions. They haven't really kind of shown how to put them into practice. And so I was just hoping you can say a little bit about what you're doing in chapter 6 to kind of, rectify that.
Yeah, this is a kind of complicated chapter, but still I need to, this is one of the main arguments that I want to build up. To be honest with you, me being ex-monastic members, most Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, many Tibetan Buddhist practitioners or meditators, they really don't care about the psychological materials of the Buddha's teaching, teaching. And there's a very strict guidance and just follow that. And then sometimes it becomes we don't know, they lost the, direction. And without understanding the functions of the mind, there's no way to be called to catch a pure meditation in Buddhism. So, to settle down mind, we need to understand the movements of the thoughts, evolving and dissolving thoughts. And to understand them, then it is crucial to understand or study mental factors. Otherwise, there's no systematic way to recognize. For example, how can you define this as anger? There's a modern psychologist's definition. That is one thing, but there's another religious point of view or Buddhist point of view. There's also definitions, and how do you recognize that? As a meditator who is in the path of practice, and then if they don't study a little bit about mental factors, it's difficult to recognize. Recognizing thoughts is the first stage of meditation, as the Mahamudra teaching says. And so answering to your question now is that my first strategy is that the Abhidharmasamuccaya chapter 2 talks about the Four Noble Truths, and the Four Noble Truths has a what you call segments. It is called what to be abandoned and what to be adopted. From that, what to be abandoned are those afflicted mental factors. What to be adopted in the path is also those virtuous mental factors. And so I will analyze how mental factors were intersected into the path of Four Noble Truths, contemplation or meditation of Four Noble Truths. This is one thing. And then I will look into practice, what you call manuals, such as Tsongkhapa's Namrim Chemo. And in the what you call mediocre practitioners, and he instructs, what to be abandoned and what to be applied, all those mental factors. And then I will look into those mental, texts, manual texts, meditation guidance, and then I will, argue how important mental factors are for the Buddhist practice. And then, of course, there are, like I said, the Padana practice, and then there are more practice like a Mahamudra guidance, manuals. And then, like, even for the Bodhisattva avatar and the Lodro practice, you cannot establish a proper, Lodro practice without having a mindfulness and conscientiousness or alertness. But you need to first understand what is mindfulness. And you need to rely on one, reliable source. And that through that, you have to, introvertedly experience that mindfulness and recognize, and then you settle down your meditation. So I will look into those manuals, and then I will write. Is that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question and for your answer. I actually was thinking about something related to what Matilda asked. Do you often have to deal with the kind of negative response from Buddhist practitioners to your topic, and how do you deal with it? Because it's, I don't know, I have sometimes uneasy feelings about the topic that I pursue in my research, and I can relate.
Okay, first of all, my dissertation is purely built on what you call religious studies. It's doctrinal studies. This is not I'm not looking from a social scientist point of view. I'm looking from a textual studies point of view. Hermeneutics. So from a commentary point of view, for textual studies, from that point of view, I have not bigger struggles as what social scientists might have or political scientists might have, right? So these are two different things. But that doesn't mean that I don't have any obstacles or challenges on my way. Sometimes, yes, I mean, that there's a two big world, okay? What we need to understand, and we also need to care about, I mean, I care about is there's a whole traditional monastic experts and institutions and academics that represents the Tibetan Buddhist scholarship and knowledge. And here I am between that monastic scholarship and the Western perspectives, study field. So from those point of view, they may imagine me as, oh, he's a Western scholar now because he studies in Western universities, and therefore it's like a, less authentic. And sometimes this might have happened, but fortunately, I was an ex-monastic members, and I also studied quite many years. And so those who knows me, like, profoundly, has less doubt on these kind of things. So even like, this using Abhidharma psychology is a one small example. They could have even saying, oh, Abhidharma material should not be studied in the university, which is like what you call secular, which follows the secular ethics. So I might face this kind of arguments and problems, but I have to deal nicely. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very interesting. And when you were studying back within the monastic tradition, you studied different topics, right? I mean, it wasn't, you have not touched upon Abhidharma psychology back then.
Yeah. So in the monastic institute, there are different curriculums or syllabus for different monasteries. And I studied in a small Kagyu monastery in Nepal, Pokhara, called Vikramshila. And in a Kagyu tradition, we have 8 major philosophical treatises that has to be completed. And so one of them is Abhidharma studies. Abhidharma as a doctrinal topic. Then I studied, yes, but not as Abhidharma psychology. I studied as an Abhidharma subject, and so I studied. At that time, when I was like around mid-20s, when I was studying, one of the earliest questions that I have in mind is, Abhidharmasamuccaya gives 51 mental factors, and Abhidharmakosha gives 46 mental factors. And then it raises a question for me, if they all comes from Buddha's teaching, why they have a different numbers of mental factors? And this is a question, I have kept for over 20 years, and now I'm answering through my dissertation. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Jinjing Li.
Sure.
Thanks you for the talk. And the question is about your framework. A lot of scholars like Maria Aim or Emily McGrath, who draw from Abhidharma resources to study emotions, tend to follow the approach of moral psychology or moral phenomenology. And Jinjing wonders if you would be interested in expanding your scope from psychology as such to moral psychology.
Yeah, this, as Bhikkhu Bodhi already defined the scope of Abhidharma psychology. It says, not just as a, what do you call conventional understanding of ethics or moral, but but the moral or ethics of the entire realm that is related to the well-beings of an inner life or something like that. So yes, I mean, like, moral psychology, and okay, first of all, Buddhist psychology has many aspects, and the modern psychologies, they can have a cognitive psychologist, they can have a behavior psychologist, they can have like a moral psychology. They can draw. They can draw many materials from Buddhist psychologies, but Buddhist psychology itself does not, construct constructed decisively upon moral or behavior or cognitive. None of them. And I'm not really interested. I need to study. I would like to study to some extent about the modern psychology, but I'm not fully into it. So I'm not sure whether I would study modern psychology or not in the future.
Thank you for your reply. And Jinjing also says, thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Because if not, I would like to thank Chulthim Gurung for his very, very detailed, wonderful presentation, and his extremely, for me, it's extremely complicated topic, and yeah, I'm just I really admire people who go that deep into the Buddhist tradition and hermeneutics and applying psychology. That's wonderful. I would pause the recording.